was very interesting. I tried to change my engine, and the game didn't let me. Normally you could flip from the front engine to the back engine, and for whatever reason this scenario is not doing it. Hello everybody, welcome back to Train Sim World, where we are back playing the Great Western Express, and we are on the freight services of the Class 66. Currently playing Aggregate Industries with a total score of 4,450 for AP score, so let's get right into this.
That was a good run from the West Country, but it's now time to get down to business and unload these wagons, set up for shunting and reverse the train through the discharge facility to get these wagons unloaded.
My favorite part is the fact that she said we were somehow doing a great run in the West Country, and we didn't even go in the West Country. We literally just moved 5 inches forward, you know what I mean? We actually have a series, not just an engine, but a series of DB Schenker rail cars filled with aggregates. I love the fact that it's full of gravel, and our goal with the gravel is to back it up and head over in that direction. We can't actually see anything, but what it wants us to do according to this part of the map is drive this off the track and onto the yard unloading area, and then eventually roll the rest of the train back onto this part of the rail line here. And we just have to make sure we don't actually hit the back end of the rail line on the back end there, but our main goal is to learn how to unload and load aggregate, so to speak. We are already, if you can kind of see our track here, we're already off on the yard itself, and so our goal here with this, if we hit our timetable there, is enter slow speed control on the EM2000, turn it on, set the reverser to reverse, set the speed to 3 miles an hour, start the slow speed control using F1 on the EM2000. Keep in mind that's F1, not this F1, where we can watch this wonderful network turbo in fantastic timing zoom right on by me. That was great. So first thing, of course, is the slow speed control. I don't know if that's really the best way to go, but sure, we will do that. We're going to go ahead and hit this very bright select button, and that will pull up, ironically, this button here, and I'm like, what in the world is this? So it says hit select again. That makes no sense. So in order to get the slow speed control, we probably should hit the help button, but there is no way to hit the help button. So actually what they're really talking about is this speed control button there. It's very interesting how this icon is hidden select, but they really want us to hit the speed control button. So with that, it says condition for speed control. Locomotive must be set up in SCC mode. In order to do that, we just need to turn the thing on. So here is the on-off button. We turned off the entire locomotive. Good job, me. So in fact, let me just go right into that screen so everything is so much easier. Let's turn it right back on there. Hit the speed control button one more time. And we have to be set up in SSD mode or SSC mode. What they're actually talking about here is this button. So the button on the side, we have to turn this on to start. From here, we can turn the reverser to reverse. We don't even have the reverser handle in yet, so maybe we should probably plug that in and set that into reverse. And then it says set the slow speed control to 3.0. And what's nice about this is you can actually see the dial there, and you can actually see it hit 3.0 when you do up and down on this button here. But what we probably should do is turn on our cab light. For the folks that want to know, the cab light again is up in the top corner here. This will make everything so much easier. The headlights, because we're technically off on the yard doing yard work, this should be, please somebody in the UK correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes I just don't know this stuff because I'm from America, so what can I say? So this should technically count as yard work, so I should technically change this to yard work. I got some points for that. Excellent. Don't need the demister. I could do a brake test. We will do that later. I probably want to turn on intermittent lights. I'm going to leave the tail lights off for now. In the meantime, start speed control using F1 in the EM2000. It does say we could just hit start. It now says set speed 3 miles an hour, actual speed 0 miles an hour. So let's go ahead and hit F1 there. And I believe my engine is about ready to go. Actually, there is one more thing. I forgot about this. Folks, if you don't remember, in the last episode here, I was talking about your isolation. Your DSD isolate switch is going to be unisolated when you hit this toggle, and you want to make sure you toggle not the computer control fuse, but the 24-volt supply fuse. That will turn on your AWS for the folks that love to have warnings on this particular engine. It would be fantastic, and I wish I could turn this knob, but I doubt that's turn onable. And from here, we could just go ahead and release our brakes, And as usual, we need to remember, we need to remember that this needs to go to 5.1 and the other toggle needs to drop these all the way down. So let's go ahead and get the brakes off completely. Okay, so now that we got the brake cylinder down to 0, 0, or somewhere near enough to it, this is actually 0, 0 here, 0, 0 there, 5.1 for this, 5.0, I guess. That's fine. And if you notice we're on a slight incline here, we can actually avoid that by just simply putting the direct brake on, just to ensure that we have the direct brakes on. We're going to be backing up our throttle to notch 3, so we could just definitely put this in notch 3. One thing it didn't tell you is that you already have an engine that's running. All of these switches are already on. In the event somehow you end up in a shed that didn't have this setup here, you probably will want to turn on engine run, you probably want to turn on gen field switch, and you probably want to turn on the control and fuel pump switch, all of those on. The only reason my engine's not rolling along because I got the direct brakes on apply. My parking brake is off already, and for this particular mission it is off, but if we had to, we can always hit this button to knock the parking brake on. We wanted to look outside, folks. We'd probably pop open a window, adjust our mirror so we can see what's behind us and pop our head out. But if we look behind us, oh my god, we can't see anything back here. This is actually pretty ridiculous to see where we're going, regardless if you're on this side or if you are on the other side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drop my throttle to 1. Just leave it on 1 for a second. So we're going to go ahead and pop out and hurt my head there by busting through the window. Even if we popped out on this side, it's ridiculously hard to see in the shed. Normally, if you were doing this in a train, you normally would have extra people kind of to help out. We can actually have 2 windows to look out. That's actually really useful. I love that. But if we just simply go to camera 2, you can see we're crossing over. I'm going to pretend that's the Thames River. I'm sure somebody else will know exactly what this is. But realistically, we're outside South Hall West Yard. I believe I've got that right. And we are currently working on unloading our aggregate. Let's go to the back camera here. In fact, let's even just go to camera 8 and see what's up out this way. We've got this wonderful machine that's taken all of this aggregates, and what's happening here is all getting unloaded. And what I love about this is all of the aggregates go down this hole and the train just keeps on rolling backwards from that point. And all of those aggregates are actually meant for this particular business here. This happened to be, I presume, a concrete facility. It's very hard to tell when they have these secret black boxes here hanging out on the side. I'm sure that's not meant to be. But if we just kind of go off and explore the business itself, it really does look like it's a concrete facility. After all, these are concrete mixers. I presume that's what this is. But it's, again, very bizarre because I don't know if this is actually a true concrete mixer. Because if we just happen to go all the way over here, we discover, 1, the pipe is completely closed off. 2, the pipe that's supposed to channel and shunt stuff up that way is in the middle of the bushes underneath a bridge. I am assuming this is real life when I say this, but it's under the roadway, so I don't quite understand how this is working right next to what appears to be somebody's business. So yeah, I also presume this pipe happens to be going somewhere as well, but it is so hard to tell where it's even going because that's going to the top of the building. Maybe that's where all the aggregates actually get pumped into. Who even knows? This particular mission for the Class 66 is one of the more slower missions. It will take some time to actually get through the other end of the mission. Since this mission is going to take a while, let us talk about where the Class 66 even came from and what is even the purpose of the Class 66, folks. So the Class 66 here is a 6-axle train, as you can see by the axles there, and was designed and developed in part from the Class 59 for the use on railways in the UK. Since its introduction, the Class has been very successful and sold not only to the British Rail, wow, that was weird, British Rail, but it was also sent over to overseas, if you want to call it that, to the European continent. Whether we will ever see this kind of engine in America, maybe it's possible, maybe not. We will have to wait and see what happens there. In the meantime, in continental Europe, the Class 66 is considered the EMD Class 66. How original, folks, how original. In the case of when British Rail got privatized in 1996, something called the Wisconsin Central Transportation System, under the control of somebody named Ed Burkhart, bought a number of the newly privatized rail freight companies. This included Transrail Freight, Mainline Freight, Load Haul, and eventually Rail Freight Distribution and Rail Express Systems. Ed controlled nearly 93% of UK rail freight. While this is all happening here, let's check out how our aggregate train works. So we start off full 100% and then we start to unload the aggregate. So if we just kind of hang out in the cars, this stuff literally just gets sucked up and goes right into the ground mysteriously like magic. There is nothing in here that even tells you the thing is happening other than the sound of aggregate just falling all the way down to the ground. Why we want to really stay back here is because we want to kind of pay attention to our train, because we do have a bumper right there that we don't want to accidentally run into. We're not going back into the main line. We're actually popping out here and staying right there. This set of rail cars is really long, and it's almost long enough to actually hit that, so we do have to pay a little attention as we go along here. Once the public got involved in the rail company owning literally 93% of UK rail when it got privatized, that is not privatization, folks, at least not in America. That's considered a monopoly. In America, that would be shut down and broken up horribly. In the UK, on the other hand, that didn't happen. That got the company changed into something called the English, Welsh, and Scottish Railway. Fancy way of saying we own the entire railway system still. All we did was change our name. The English, Welsh, and Scottish Railway is also known as the EWS, and they inherited a fleet of 1,600 mainly diesel locomotives with a rough age of about 30 years between them, and 300 of those had been essentially taken apart and just torn up into spare parts and used for different parts. But what happened was the Class 47 at the time that was purchased needed major overhauls every 7 years, and that costed around £400,000, but yet had an average daily availability of less than 65% with only 16 days between major failures. Imagine driving a rail engine that has 16 days between the time that you use it and the time that it breaks down and you have to start using spare parts yet again. That would be quite terrible, folks. That would just be insanely bad. We're almost done with our aggregate drop. We just have to at least get through this last set of rail cars right here and we will be able to get moving. The EWS decided to offer not only lower pricing, but they couldn't do that with the high cost of repairs and whatnot. They needed to reduce operating costs and increasing availability, and this is where the Class 59 came in, and right after it, the Class 66 shortly after. For now, let us deal with this last of the aggregate, and let us make sure we know how to slow our train down, because we gotta essentially stop our train very shortly here. All right, we have finally unloaded the aggregate. Let us put our throttle onto idle, and we probably just set up the brakes here, apply automatic brakes. That is totally fine. Let's go ahead and do it before we crash into the back end there. Please stop. Thank you. That was good enough. We are currently inside the shed of the shed. I love that. We're in the shed of the shed. Let's see how close we got. We had at least 2 rail cars, maybe 1 rail car of length there. It says turn the slow speed control off. All we have to do is just flip the control right here, turn that off.
That was great work. You should get that train over to Acton Yard, where it can be prepared before the return trip to the Mendips.
Folks, I was totally wrong. Oh my god, we're actually at the Hayes Tarmac sidings. How did I even get Southall? Southall is a little bit that way in the direction that I'm facing here. Oh my god, where did I go wrong with this? Our goal is to take our train from Hayes Tarmac siding over to Acton Yard, and we're currently still in the yard, so we're going to keep the lights the way they are just for a moment. But it does say set the reverser to forward, so we're going to go ahead and turn this reverser right here to forward, and then it says release the automatic brakes. But in the case of just not wanting to roll backwards or anything, I'm going to apply the direct brake. We're going to go ahead and release those automatic brakes, and of course wait patiently for the brakes to do a thing. So up next, we're going to put power to the throttle, and where we're going to be going first is the Hayes Good Loop, followed by Acton Yard Reception, and then we're going to disconnect these 12 vehicles that we've got behind me before we head over to the shunt of the siding, and we'll be talking about the siding when we get down there. With me releasing the automatic or the independent brake, technically this would be like an independent brake of a regular locomotive. This right here, they call it a direct brake here, but that's totally fine. And about 623 yards or so, we're going to be exiting the area that we're in. If we go to map 9, we can kind of see what's happening. We're actually popping out onto this particular track here, and this particular track technically does link up with some of the other tracks, but it's not quite the main line itself. So we can definitely work with this as part of the yard if we need to. I'm not going to actually change my headlamps until after I've stopped at that particular location up ahead. The Class 59 was considered a more powerful, highly reliable, and lower operating cost. EWS approached the builder Electromotive Diesel, aka EMD as we all know and love. EMD, then a division at the time of General Motors, EMD offered their JT42CWR model, which actually had the same loading gauge passing body shell as the Class 59. The thing with that is the engine and traction motors were different models to enable higher speeds. Ugh, I can't even say that. Enable higher speeds, and thus the Class 66 incorporated General Motors version of a stealth steering bogie. Whether that's the same bogie as these two bogies here on the radio dial, I am not sure, but the bogie, at least in UK speak, would be a radio truck in American speak, right? And the radio truck is essentially designed to reduce track wear and increase adhesion on the curve. Oh my god, I just screwed myself up. I set up my AWS and it didn't beep. I forget about this, folks. So sometimes the AWS just does not work. If you have this problem on the Class 66, on the HST, or even the 166, the only way to do this is you got to vacate your emergency brake valve. You just got to depressurize your emergency brake. You got to let your brake go down to zero. You got to at least let in the context of the airflow indicator, let that go down to zero. Eventually this brake demand light, as you can see there, is currently blinking. At some point the brake demand will turn itself off. It does want the throttle to go down to zero, so we do have to make sure that we turn off that throttle in particular. And the brakes are already off, so we don't need really anything in our brakes. I doubt we can even pressurize them or anything like that. Even this direct brake may not necessarily work, so we do have to wait patiently for this particular brake demand light to go off. A lot of times what happens is you think you do this right, and the only reason I didn't do this on the 166, the only reason I didn't do this on the HST, at least not yet, is I didn't want to be late to the service. It kind of sucks when you're late. Okay, that took a little bit of time. I realized I had to put the reverser onto neutral for that little blinky light to finally stop. I actually put this one on a direct brake hold just to try that same thing. Well, that's okay. We can now release this anyhow. We'll go ahead and release the emergency brake valve, close that off. We can now put the reverser back and forward again. Now we can drive our train. Yay. Go back to throttle 3 and hopefully I don't hit the AWS again and get screwed. So sometimes I notice sometimes in the Great Western Express the plates you drive over don't always make noise, so the light lights up, but nothing else happens, and that's very annoying. Oh, and the other thing is I actually have to recharge my brakes. I forgot about that. So I can't roll along until I recharge my brakes. So if this ever happens to you and you get stuck and you have that AWS get flipped, you do have to kind of reset your engine. It's not always the most intuitive thing sometimes because there's no instruction on it, and you think you've done it right, and then you realize, oh, maybe I didn't, and you forget one little detail, and then you realize you did finally. Like, for example, I have the parking brakes on now, just because I didn't want to roll away, so I should be able, without that parking brake off or whatever, it should start moving. There it goes, we're moving, finally moving. So where I was going with this bogie, or the radio truck, in American speak and UK speak here, it's designed to reduce track wear and increase adhesion on the curves. So why does this particular train need it? It only goes 75 miles an hour. Maybe at the time it was one of the fastest trains out there, but now the HST is one of the fastest trains out there, not this one. So I don't exactly know why it's a thing. Somebody out there can definitely correct me on that and get me to kind of figure out how that is actually meant to be. But the English, Welsh, and Scottish Railway placed an order for 250 of these units in May of 1996 to be built at the EMD plant in London, Ontario, Canada. London, Ontario, Canada, folks. That's where these engines first got built, of all things. Why it is there, who knows? But it got built there at a cost of £375 million, and was financed by something called Locomotion Capital, which eventually got converted to something called Angel Trains. Yay, how exciting. So we're going to come to a stop here, and we don't have to be exactly perfect on this stop, but it really does help to do that. Before we get going, it says to wait for a moment. Because this train here has a daytime run mode, has a nighttime run mode, a yard work run mode, make sure that your lights are properly set to daytime so that way when you do take off, it will set that up for you. If you notice, the intermittent lights actually got turned off on us. Very crafty game, very crafty. It not only did that, it turned me from yard work to daytime run mode. It did this, so make sure you check your control panels, and you might as well open this back up and make sure your fuses are properly set too, because the game sometimes screws you up like this when it does these sort of missions. So we're headed to Acton Yard Reception. That is in about 5.6 miles, so let's go ahead and throttle up to 3 and release our brakes. If you hate holding the brakes like this, you could always just release the brakes, just by holding your finger on, the semicolon button, and just wait patiently for your brake to drop off. What we do have to remember is keep ourselves to 75 miles an hour, and we are good. The first of these locomotives that shipped to the UK arrived at some place called Immingham in June of 1998. I've never been to Immingham. Somebody else can probably pronounce this a little better than I can. Wait till I start doing the German stuff. That's going to be so much fun. And then eventually these locomotives were taken to Derby for testing. The second one was taken to the AAR Pueblo Test Center for endurance testing before eventually being shipped to the UK itself. The locomotives were then shipped to the UK at a rate of 11 locomotives per month into the UK via the Newport docks until the order was completely completed by December of 2001. After unloading these engines, the EWS engineers then took off the tarpaulin, unblocked the suspension, and finally, as each of these were shipped with water and fuel, just simply connected the batteries before starting the engine and handing the locomotive literally right into service. It's kind of crazy that they did that the engines were completely shipped with all of its stuff inside of the engine that you didn't need to necessarily fill up or anything. By the way, this particular engine, if you notice, we have 8 notches on our throttle, no longer 5, so we can kind of get some speed. This is fantastic news, right folks? We do have a horn here, by the way. The high horn happens to be a space bar, the low horn happens to be the N key, and we don't need to bleep, but this guy here is driving the HST in the opposite direction, so no worries there, we don't need to stress them out. But we will be going to 5.1 miles, and we will be stopping at Acton Yard, and then eventually doing our siding stuff in the outside a little bit. If you want to see what this looks like from the outside, this is our wonderful red line that is driving along the rails on the other side of the rails. When being an American, it's really hard to see this driving on the, figuratively speaking, this side of the road. Normally you'll be driving on the right while everybody here drives on the left. Not some ED feat, at least for me, to stare at this. One of the advantages of the Class 66 was the ability to start this engine up as soon as delivery happened on the dock and drive them on their own power with no towing needed. Excellent feature to depots wherever those depots were going to eventually enter into service. Nobody's on the yellow line here finally, so we could just zoom along without blowing the horn. Life is good. But yeah, so the revelation of the fact that these Class 66s were just fit for service as soon as they dropped in, needed just to have batteries connected, they were ready to go. And this was compared with the Class 60, even the Class 59 beforehand. The fact that this could happen is just surely astonishing. One of the other advantages, if you remember earlier, that 16 days between locomotive failures, you take that rate and you go down to an availability of 95% on the Class 66 itself, aiming for literally a minimum 180 days between failures, which is extremely good. And the Class 66 was also designed to cover 1.6 million kilometers between any kind of rebuild that it happened to have. The advantage of 1.6 million kilometers between each rebuild service is actually the equivalent of about 18 years of service time, which each major rebuild costing of about £200,000, which isn't bad realistically compared to the previous locomotives beforehand. Alright folks, we are about to hit our 60 zone like really fast, so I'm going to slow this train down and overspeed just a little bit. Sorry about this folks, for the folks that care about speeding. I am already under speed. We are okay. Life is okay. We're going to be stopping at 1.4 miles and then continuing on from this point, but before that AWS screwed me over, right? We don't need our AWS screwing me over at all. We got one more station to kind of drive through. I am hoping nobody's standing on that line. We'll just kind of beep at them. In fact, there are a lot of people standing on that line while I'm trying to hit that AWS. Out of the way, people. We got a double yellow followed by a single yellow followed by, ironically, another yellow, but we do have a 30-mile-an-hour zone. We are coasting down to our 30-mile-an-hour zone. We should be able to make it pretty well. But the original Class 66s were actually designated as Class 61. So would you believe that the Class 66s were never known as 66s, and the shed name came a little bit later, obviously. But the Class 66 eventually got their designation from the British classification system, also known as TOPS. In 1998, Freightliner then placed an order for these very same locomotives, and they were followed by GB Rail Freight is what I'm trying to say, and then Direct Rail Services also placed an order, and the last of more than 500 of these built over an 18-year period was the shed by the name of number 66779, also known as the Evening Star, delivered to the GB Rail Freight in the spring of 2016, not that all long ago. The fact it was called the Evening Star was a play after the last steam locomotive by the same name. We are currently switching over into Action Yard Reception. We got a 15-mile-an-hour zone before we have to drop our speed. One of the things about the Class 66s is, for rail enthusiasts, it is kind of an unpopular train just because it replaced and pushed out a lot of the older types of British-built locomotives. The fact that they were highly reliable has helped the freight line to remain competitive in the UK, and rail enthusiasts actually labeled the sheds at the time the Red Death. Whether that's still called that today, please let me know. I'm super curious if it really is still called the Red Death, because of the fact that they pushed out so many other locomotives. In fact, every locomotive and train in here is literally the Red Death locomotive rolling on in, and you can kind of get the idea of how that happened and why they took that name. However, when they also acquired the nickname of the shed itself because of the EWS, which then became something known as DBS, the DB Schenker group, right? And the sheds were named this because of the way the roof shape here is kind of an upturned, almost shed-like look here. So the Freightliner locomotive get called the Freds, not the sheds, but the Freds, as a combination between the word Freightliner and shed. They were really crafty to put their brand name into the name of the shed by giving them a real person name known as Fred. Alright folks, we are coming up on our stop here at Action Yard Reception. We're going to be slowing our train down a little bit, so we're just going to drop our throttle down to idle, and we're just going to, actually we might have to keep the throttle up because this train is slowing down on its own, so we're going to keep our throttle moving just a little bit more because we're going to end up having a dead stop a little too early, and we don't want to do that. So let's go back to Knott Street and not even do what I was just doing there. Let's keep our train going. In fact, I think it's because the brakes are on. Ah, I have the brakes on. No wonder my train is just slowing down on its own. That's just so dumb. Somebody, why didn't you tell me the brakes were on? I didn't realize I left the brakes on. I'm so bad about this. Alright, we finally made it to Action Yard Reception. And we're just going to try to coast this way over. And it's probably not going to do that because I am just a terrible driver, it seemed, of the DB Schenker sheds, Freds, Class 66, Red Deaths. I'm just a terrible driver, but I like driving freight because it's kind of fun to just kind of match up this to the stopping point that we want to be at there and just do our best to stop our train on a dime, especially when it says like 0 yards. That's what we want to try to do there. So there we go. We got it. 500 AP for that.
You'll need to refuel before the return trip. So detach from the wagons and move the locomotive over to the fuel stand.
So our goal here now is let's go ahead and put the direct brake on. We're going to put that on apply. Uncouple vehicles. We just need to uncouple the back of the 12 vehicles. Before we continue on, we probably put the headlight marker to yard work because we're essentially doing yard work here. Please someone from the UK tell me if that's not correct. I would love to know. We probably want to put the reverser onto neutral, and because we're here, we probably want to turn on the parking brake. Let's just be ultra safe, folks. We should really be ultra safe when we're driving a train like this. We're going to pop the door open here. We're going to pop open the second door here. Climb down the ladder. I said climb, that's climb up, which we want to climb down the ladder. Fine, we'll just fall out and go down. And we're going to come right over here to unlatch these couplers here, and these are actually your traditional like hook couplers, and it's really cool that this is set up for manual coupling. And if I do this, I can click to uncouple, which is really nice. All right, we're back in the engine. I don't think you need to remember how to get back in the engine. That should be pretty counterintuitive, or fairly intuitive for folks that know how to do this. What we do need to remember is turn off our parking brake. We probably should just turn off our direct brake. And the direct brake should apply here like it does in American Freight, where the direct brake is actually influencing the engine, less the cars. But we are going to turn our automatic brake all the way off. And then we're going to go ahead and set our reverser to, oh my god, I got out of the Z. We're going to set our reverser to forward and throttle up to 3 at least. And that should get our shed moving forward to the next 528 yards down the line. Oh folks, I forgot, turn on your tail lights before you get moving. That's kind of important because you are now in the yard and you probably want your tail lights on, so that way at least everybody knows it is you, even though we have a blinky back behind us. But believe it or not, we could actually use our direct brake, and we can even apply our direct brake, and it should slow down this train pretty nicely. And we should be able to drop down, but we could also use our automatic brakes to slow this train down. That may actually be the better way to go. We're going to be stopping at this siding, or the shunt siding, as you can say. It is very weird how this train did this and kind of the direction it went to be in this particular position. But if you happen to be at Acton Mainline there, that is actually Acton Mainline Station. So you could technically train spot me driving my shed all the way to the end of the line and stopping it here at this point. I love the fact that you can train spot right on the yard, right outside of the train itself. Let's go ahead and lock this train down for a second. And it says stop at location, action yard, refueling. There's a couple ways to go about doing this. We could reverse the engine, but if you think about, again, the window here, if we just open this window, pop our head out here, look backward, we could technically see where we're going. Or we could flip around and use the other end. I think it might be good just to back up. Realistically, it'd just be easier just to back this train up, because if you kind of look at where we're going, we're just going down the line and we're coming back up into this point. However, with that said, we are actually going to be flipping the train around anyways. In case you want to know how to flip this train around, let us go ahead and leave a couple of these things on. We're going to jump into the back of the car, and you'll notice the back of the car is slightly different. So we got a door here, a main door. You would think this main door goes to the engine itself, but the main door actually goes outside. There's actually both doors on both sides. It's very odd how this is a separate compartment of all things. It's got a second seat and all that good stuff, but if we look at the controls here, the controls are the same as the front of the engine. The brakes are the same as the front of the engine. In fact, the engine is practically the same with the exception of the cab lights. And in fact, I don't think this jet light actually works. The tail light does work. And if we do this, we will notice the tail lights are actually operational on both sides of the engine, which is very curious how that works. We can actually set this up to be yard work on this side, which is also very interesting. And we can put the reverser handle in on this side. If you notice, the AWS came on there. If I leave that AWS on non-isolated and it's active, it will power up on this end of the engine, which is really curious how that works. We probably do want the intermittent light so I can at least see what's going on this end of the train. And in order to go forward, what I am going to do on the back end, I'm going to go ahead and put the reverser back to neutral. And I'm just going to take it out because we really don't need it on this side of the train. We have our brakes already on hold and all that other good stuff, so I'm going to leave that alone. And what I am going to turn off, the only thing I'm going to turn off is the tail lights here. And the only other thing I'm going to turn off is the light up on this particular car. And for the sake of knowing which train we're in, we're going to turn off the desk light and the cab lights. We're going to go ahead and get ourselves moving. We'll put this on forward. All of these don't need to be turned on because the engine is already running. We're going to go ahead and power up our throttle. And we're actually going to release the brake using the button. Folks, so that was very interesting. I tried to change my engine, and the game didn't let me. Normally you could flip from the front engine to the back engine, and for whatever reason this scenario is not doing it. I am totally shocked right now, it's not letting me. What I did do in the meantime, I did set this up for yard work because we're going to be basically hanging out in the yard going forward, right? So we don't need to worry about that light there, but we are just going to go ahead and put the reverser into reverse, and we're going to go ahead and throttle backwards. Like American Freight, by the way, we're going to make sure my train starts moving good. So like American Freight here, we're going to go a little too fast when we do that. We do have to pay attention to where our train is going, and this section is when we start to have manual switches. So we want to make sure at least our switches are set properly. We're going over to this switch, and then from there we just need to make sure the rest of our switches are set to where we want to go, where we can go all the way straight back this way into the refueling center. Unfortunately, it does mean I have to stick my head out the window here like this in order to back up and to go all the way over there 300 yards in the other end. Whatever. Thanks a bunch, buddy. Thanks a bunch. I was hoping to drive it from this side, but it didn't want to let me do that. I don't know what I did wrong this time, but I swear when I did this the first time, I was able to drive this backwards. Right now, for some reason, it just doesn't want me to. Alright folks, we are coming around the corner here. Our engine is currently passing the switch, and unfortunately decides to stop just before it completely switches. Why do you do that, engine? This particular engine, very touchy with the brake. All I need to do is get this one wheel over the switch, and then I can finally switch the switch lever. This switch lever is really unique. I like the take on it. I mean, it's like the American one, just different. Although I don't exactly know, how do you tell when your track is properly switched? Because when you're looking at this dead on, it really doesn't have a difference. So this is where I like American switching a little bit better here. Ironically, by the way, the 6605 or the 66005 is one of the earlier shed models released, because the shed numbers came out releasing from 66001 all the way to 66957. So it's very interesting that these two sheds that are sitting here are pretty early on in the shed system. So we have to drop our throttle, and we're going to kind of coast along here because our stop's coming right up at the refueling stand. It does want my engine all the way out there, which is kind of curious, but if you think about where the fuel cap is, that isn't a bad location for it. But if you're in this engine, you can't really see realistically where that fuel cap is. You can sort of see. This is where something on American Freight has over the UK, at least right now, in terms of the shed versus one of the typical engines in the American system. At least there's a line in the American system that does tell you where the refueling stand is. So we're going to try to hit this point on a dot here, because we are going to hit that post right there. I don't want to bump against that. But yeah, so you can kind of see the fuel cap is right there, right where it's pointing. And I've done something horrible. Let's go back inside my engine before I do something really bad by letting it roll away, because you can see it has a 0.1% drop. I didn't even turn on my brakes, so let's go ahead and put the direct brake on, and for extra safety we can put on the parking brake, and for extra safety we could just turn this on all the way, which it already is. Where were we, folks? We just got to pull off the fuel cap, drop that there, and then we just pick up our fuel line and pop that nozzle right on in. Pop that nozzle right on in. Come on, nozzle. There it goes. Oh my gosh, why don't you work, man? And then all we have to do is just turn the fuel valve and let that refuel up. And the engine supposedly is supposed to go to maximum capacity, but if you look at the little dial here, the maximum capacity is already full. Why do we need to refuel a full engine? That is okay. It says it's officially done, so we're just going to pop that right back off and throw it right back onto the stand. I said we're going to... Really? You just got... What in the world? I took you back off. Why are you still there? We're going to pop that onto the stand, I say. Why won't you work? There it goes. What in the world? It's just being weird right now. So let's go ahead and put the fuel cap back on.
Now the locomotive is ready to go. Get it hooked back up to the wagons, and that'll be you done for the day.
So next up, all we have to do is go back over to Action Yard Track M and then Action Yard R1 before we couple up to the 12 vehicles that we're going to be taking out, and then head over to something called the porter cabins. I believe that's like the modules in America. We'll see. Well, since the game's going to be a little bit of a butt about me driving, we're just going to go ahead and release the direct brakes. We're going to go ahead and release the parking brakes. We're going to, I probably should have put the reverser in neutral, but that is okay. We're being a little unsafe today. And we're going to go ahead and release the automatic brake and just let that bail off completely, patiently waiting patient. Alrighty, with our brakes bailed off, we're going to go to number 9 for the map. And we just want to make sure our switches are all set properly again, taking us all the way to the track that we need to be on. As you can see, there's at least one switch we do need to change. And all of the other switches should be, for the most part, set. We're just going to be going to the outside of this long siding over here and just stopping there for a second. Alright, folks, so with us coming up to Action Yard Track M, We just need to slow our train down a little bit, and we're going to actually wait till we get a little closer to that sign finally, and then hit our automatic brake and apply that. We just need to essentially pass this little icon right here and just get us to pass this just enough so we can change our switch in the opposite direction. Happiness abound when we finally get to that spot there. That is perfect. Next up is Action Yard R1. So we're going to be going forward now. And our goal here is to couple up against the train cars that's up ahead, folks. And with this section, by the way, the switches are automatically done for you, so you don't necessarily need to do anything from this section forward. It will take care of it. You don't have to worry about that. The dispatcher, what you might do is just contact the signaler, and the signaler will just tell you whether or not you can proceed as signals indicate. Now, I can't say I know this for certain, but in American freight, at least you should stay under 4 miles an hour roughly when you're coupling up cars. However, in this case, we've got something a little bit different. It does tell us to stop at that particular location before coupling, but then it sets to couple the formation as a completely different objective. And so in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to stop in about 91 yards, and we're just going to back off our throttle, and we're just going to let ourselves coast the rest of the way to our little stopping point. With us reaching our stopping point, it is time to apply the brakes, and let's go ahead and put them on completely. We almost passed the yardage. That was a little bit too fast there. Couple to formation 12 vehicles. If we look at the front of our engine is not properly set up for coupling, while the back says it is. So we actually have to look at this for a second. Let's go to camera 8. We are actually coupling against the same type of car here with the same type of hook, so we don't have to worry about pulling out the knuckle coupler. We're just going to go with the hook coupler, which is already set up for us. Our guy in the cab here, he says he believes he can do this. We'll see if that's actually accurate or if he can even make it work or not. Let's just go ahead and go to camera 8 and hop in right next to the rail cars. We do have these buffers. One of the advantages of UK rail is if you go too fast, you don't have to worry about a thing because the buffers are going to take care of everything for you. In fact, this should maybe automatically couple for me. We will find out momentarily. Let's go ahead and put the brakes on and probably stop the brakes. There it goes. We just bounced off those buffers. That was so much fun. Let's go ahead and put direct brakes. I don't even know how that's possible. Direct brakes are on, the parking brakes are on, and this is already set to on, so we can actually wait a minute, one more thing. Reverser to neutral, and then we can hop out. We're going to go ahead and go downstairs, and let us see if it's even possible to couple this train together. I believe we can. Manually coupling, click to couple.
A job well done. Grab a break in the porter cabins by the car park.
We did it, and my head got horribly smashed by this. My gosh, that was terrible. Next up, it says head to the porter cabin over there to complete the scenario. I don't think that's wise to do. I do think there's a couple more things we probably should do in the cab. Like, we probably don't need the lights on anymore at this point, so we might as well turn that off. We don't need the tail lights. We don't need the cab lights or the desk lights. We probably don't even need to leave the engine on, but we're just going to leave the engine running. Somebody probably wants it. And we're going to take the reverser handle back off. I think at this point, one last thing. We should probably turn off our 24-volt supply fuse. And we probably should turn off our DSD isolation switch back to isolate. Otherwise, we've got it. We are set. Let us go ahead and walk over to the, oh my God, why do they call it porta cabin? Because that's what I'm going to call porta potties at some point, because I'm so used to as an American calling porta potties, while calling a porta cabin a modular building. Okay, porta cabins is much easier to say, folks. By the way, folks, I did fail on one thing. I forgot to set the handbrakes earlier. In case you're wondering about the handbrakes, go ahead and turn this to on. It's really cool how it has a little on-off dial right there. I love that. So the handbrakes are at least applied, so at least you won't just drive your train and accidentally roll off the road somehow. With a 12-car train, we probably should just do it on both ends, so I'll just go ahead and knock that other one out and then head over to the porta cabins at some point here, folks. In case anyone doesn't believe me that I will turn on the handbrake, I am going to definitely turn on the second handbrake. We're just going to do that to make sure our train's fully locked down. If you've been liking this, folks, definitely like and subscribe. Leave me comments. I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Let's see to our final score. Our final score says we have a final score of 61 28. Our goal was to get 4450, so we definitely exceeded that beyond loops and measures. And I actually said we did pretty good despite getting out of the train that one time. So with this episode is officially complete. And of course, like, subscribe, leave me a comment, and we will see you in the next episode, folks. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys. The 2007 summer, which is kind of crazy. And in 2006, research has shown that when the weather is extremely hot, number of instances where drivers have passed a single out danger actually increase. Oh my god, I just did it to myself. Dang it.